What's up, North America? I'm Dave DeBaugh, and thanks so much for tuning in to the Underrated Pod. On tonight's pod, we are going to take a look at Alex Sarr. That's right, the number 2 draft pick in the National Basketball Association. I should also point out the best thing the Atlanta Hawks did was avoiding, even meeting, I think, with Alex Sarr. Alex Sarr ultimately had what can best be described as one of the worst summer leagues of all time. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I dare you. I triple dog dare you to go back and watch Alex Sarr's performance in game number 3 of the Summer League, where he scored a grand total of, wait for it, 0 points. He was 0 for 15 from the field, North America. To say the Atlanta Hawks did the right thing by taking Zachary instead of Alex Sarr is basically an understatement at this point. Now, I hate to actually go out on a limb, especially after just watching 4 or 5 games of Summer League basketball, and predict who's going to make it and who's not going to make it. I mean, we know that Jalen Brunson certainly didn't play that well in Summer League. Wemby, for God's sakes, actually struggled at times during Summer League as well. But this was, if you will, a disgraceful show of basketball. I watched all 4 of his games that he actually played in, and I can confidently tell you without a doubt that Quinn Snyder, the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks, absolutely did the right thing by not pushing for an Alex Sarr on their team. Now, I'm sure Alex Sarr will be a good defensive player. Now, that is if your team could afford to actually have a player like Alex Sarr actually on the court. You know, somebody that just plays defense and then actually plays keep away from the basketball, basically afraid that the basketball is, if you will, a hot potato. Look, Alex Sarr has a lot of work to do before the start of the NBA season. I am not completely writing him off at this point, but I will say what we saw was exactly what the Atlanta Hawks ultimately saw, and probably were fine with Alex Sarr actually not wanting to meet with them in the first place. In terms of the moves that the Atlanta Hawks made during the offseason, I mean, certainly there was the big trade heard around the world when they went ahead and traded DeJounte off of this team, and what they got back for DeJounte Murray is basically a lot. I mean, they ended up getting Dyson Daniels, Liddell, Larry Nance Jr., is a nice enough player. Cody Zeller, okay. But what they really did is they pulled a Danny Ainge, and they got 2 first-round draft picks. They got a 2025 and a 2027 first-round draft pick. So ultimately, I think those first-round draft picks will eventually pay some dividends for the DeJounte Murray deal. Now, personally, I thought they could have gotten more for DeJounte Murray at any point during the previous 12 months, but still, at least walking away with 2 first-round draft picks ultimately makes a lot of sense for the Atlanta Hawks, who did a phenomenal job avoiding even dealing with Alex Sarr. I mean, they also added Bogdan Bogdanovic in another deal as well, which is also a good move for this particular basketball team. Look, the Hawks last season, as we know, finished the season at 36-46. And I think we can all confidently go to bed tonight thinking that Quinn Snyder knows what he's doing as a professional basketball coach in the National Basketball Association. So your issue isn't necessarily going to be on the coaching side. The issue with the Atlanta Hawks is going to be around depth and whether or not they can bring in enough depth to actually make them semi-competitive. Or will they stay in the land of the lost, where they just sit in the land of mediocre basketball for the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, I think clearly at some point, Trae Young will most likely get moved. But I think the Atlanta Hawks brass is actually curious what they actually have with a young Zachary, combining him with Clint Capella and the other young pieces that this team has put together. So it will be interesting to see how this Atlanta Hawks team actually fares when the season starts. In terms of, did the Hawks make the right decision actually taking Zachary number 1, if you're going to compare him, at least based on the performances we saw in the Summer League versus an Alex Sarr? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. Now, I'm personally a big fan of Reed Sheppard, and it's hard to imagine a world in which Reed Sheppard actually goes number 1 in an NBA draft. But I mean, he probably was the best player in the draft this past season. He did end up going number 4. And I have to say, Reed Sheppard's absolutely the real deal. So if I had been working for the Atlanta Hawks, I might have considered Reed Sheppard with our pick. Now, the Hawks are clearly in a rebuild mode. And as I mentioned, they're hanging out in the land of the lost, which is, 10 games under 500. You can be 10 games under 500 or around 500 and just not go anywhere and just simply tread water in the association. And I think they rolled the dice on something that probably has more upside than a Reed Sheppard does. Yes, Reed Sheppard looks great out of the gate, but is there like Hall of Fame Reed Sheppard? Is that going to happen? Probably not. So the Atlanta Hawks, at the very least, are taking a stab at something that they think could be better in the long term. All right, North America. I've been meaning to cover this Alex Sarr story for quite some time. I mean, he was just so bad in the Summer League, and I hadn't really had a chance to get around to it, but he just really was. He was 4 for 12 in his first game, 4 for 14 in his second game, 0 for 15 in his third game, and 1 for 6 in his fourth game. His field goal percentage, a historically bad 19% in the Summer League. All right, North America, Bust Watch is absolutely on. I want to know what you think. Go ahead and drop in your comments and let me know what you think. Hey, if you're first checking us out on the Underrated Pod, thanks so much. Our channel's been around for a little over a year now. 1 million plus views, which includes both of our shorts and our long forms. So thanks for all of your support. For the Underrated Pod, I am Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day. To the guitar riffs we go.
You've been listening to the Underrated Podcast with Dave DeBaugh, presented by underrated.media.